everyone. My name is Roland. I'm with Heimdall Data. We are an AWS trusted partner for about over 7 years. I'll tell you a little bit about us. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about us. And I want to, since we have a small group, I want to make this very interactive. So I'll be asking some questions. And you can answer back if you'd like. The topic for today is using a security toolkit to protect Amazon RDS. So this is protecting your data. And who we are, as I mentioned, we're Heimdall Data is an ISV, AWS ISV partner. We offer a database proxy, and it improves performance and security for your database. But we're not really going to talk much about that on the performance side. We're going to talk a little bit more on the security side. And the whole goal today is to talk about some vendors that could help you. So let's first talk about the various security aspects. I'm going to start on your left, my right. What are some different areas of security that you want to protect? If I were to start at the edge, any idea you want to throw out? How you would protect incoming traffic? Like where are the different areas of security protection? I can start like edge security, like maybe you might protect at the CDN, and then if you start pulling back at the data center, where are some other areas that you would want to protect? Pardon me? It's a firewall, but where would the firewall be? Okay, at the edge router. So that would be more like a possibly a TCP/IP, a layer 3 type of router, or a layer 2 security in the OSI stack. That's a good one. So let's continue. If we move up the stack, or if we start moving back into the data center, where are some other areas of security we may have? So we talked about edge security. We talked about CDNs. We just talked about, this gentleman mentioned about a router, layer 2, layer 3. Anything else? API gateways. Good. That is a level of security. You want to protect your APIs. Anything else? Like application firewall, application security. Tell me a little bit about application security. What would you mean by that? At layer 7, right. So what do we often call that? Do you know that synonym? Pardon me? No. It's more general. It has application in there. It's a 3-letter acronym. Have you guys heard of WAF? Web Application Firewall? So that protects at the application level, which is typically web application, HTTP firewalling. So that's a web application. Correct. So there's also like code level layer 7 security as well. And what we're going to be talking about today is database proxy security. So it is the last line of defense when you look at router security, application firewall, HTTP security. And when you go past the application and you go into the data, which people try to breach or take, and there is a solution, whether you code it in the application or if you buy an off-the-shelf product or open source product, that you try to firewall there, okay? It could be SQL or NoSQL. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the vendors here that you may want to consider. MySQL offers an enterprise security firewall. It supports data masking. Not very advanced, but it's really locked in for MySQL. Imperva, has anyone heard of Imperva? This is the probably number one, not only WAF, but database security as well. They're very good in database security. They could do database data masking, data monitoring, compliance reporting. They just do it all, and it's a very well-known and very reputable company. If that's something you're interested in, it's very scalable, and it is very good. So I don't know if we have to go, we're just gonna go over some of the features that you can utilize, whether it's that product or not. There's a startup called Data Sunrise. They also support a lot of data masking, data monitoring, compliance reporting, and they're up and coming. And you'll probably see them in RSA conferences as well. Now, Heimdall Data, their focus is really on performance, but we do offer some type of security, including masking and monitoring. And then what's very unique is the Active Directory LDAP group integration. So what I want to focus on the next few minutes is just these features. But I just want to lay out some of the known products that you may want to consider using, okay? These, Imperva and MySQL Enterprise tend to be very, very popular. Any questions on this sort of vendor chart? Okay. Pardon me? The question was, why doesn't Heimdall Data do compliance reporting? It's really emphasis and roadmap. Eventually we would, but our focus isn't on just security. We focus on scaling the database and improving performance. And we do have a security module, but these are more, and I don't say this in a negative way, they're more one-trick ponies, which is their focus is on security. We just have a security module. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So this is how it's deployed typically. The database proxy sits between the application and the database, and they can do a lot of features. Block and rate limit SQL queries so that the database will not be overwhelmed or saturated. Obfuscating or masking results that come out from the database for privacy. Honey token detection. Why would you want to mask data? What's the use case? I mean, it's a very simple, I just throw that out there. Yeah, why would you want to do that? What's the use case for that? Yeah, what's the use case for that? Correct, that's it. Social security numbers, credit card numbers, you want to mask it, right? That would be one. And then honey token detection. Has anyone ever heard of honey token? That's right, honeypot, honey token. Anybody? Before I go to Stephen? Decoy? Any more? Stephen?
So, as she said, put a decoy credential or social security number like thing out there and see who tries to use it.
And if they do use it, what does that imply?
That you've been breached. And depending on how you distribute these honey tokens, you may be able to tell where you were breached.
Yeah. Does that make sense, that logic? So you're creating an entry, let's just say, in the database that's like, yeah, not even deterring, but just putting an entry which is a legitimate entry, and it's like David Aardvark. And it's made up, but you throw it out there as a decoy, and someone queries that and gets data when they shouldn't know about it, and why would they do it? Because it's really a fake entry, a blank entry. And it shows signs of, that could be a security breach. Someone's trying to poke around. Or filter them, call the cops, whatever. And
but using this example of like bait that you put out there and somebody will try to attack it. Yeah. And they say, oh, I got you.
Yeah, like there's a potential security breach, right? And then now that's where the monitoring comes in, right? And so a lot of those database proxies can do that, right? So that's another approach to sort of bait and see if someone internally, because statistics have shown like over 80% of security breaches are not from outside, but within an enterprise. So that's very interesting, okay? Yep. So query limiting, why would you want to limit queries? So any thoughts there? What is the use case of query limiting as it relates to security?
So that stops and blocks and cuts off.
Exactly, yeah. Anything to add to that? Okay, Diane said basically, when there is a lot of traffic that comes in, you can limit or you can filter, you can stop such that it doesn't saturate and overwhelm the database, and where the database basically crashes. So what you're doing there, what someone could do is sort of analogous to a DDoS attack, where they're creating a lot of connections where it's utilizing a lot of memory, and the memory is fully utilized, or the CPU gets saturated to 100%, and where that database isn't working anymore. So we could use this to limit per connection, database, schema, a user, application name, or particular queries, okay? And it controls, can control inefficiencies. Like, let's say an application is walking down a table because it's just inefficient, doing a lot of selects on row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, instead of basically grabbing the whole table. So one of the things that you could do here is you can add a pause, saying instead of walking down the table, you could potentially pause so that the database can do other things and process other information, not be overwhelmed. So that's another good thing about rate limiting. And then thirdly, again, as I mentioned, it protects the database from saturation due to a single bad user or connection, okay? This is a very standard feature, and most all proxies have this. Any questions?
In the situation of dying, that would have really been useful.
Yeah.
Well, they might be also like a business model, right? You cannot like get the data because the data is just
Yeah, you can filter based on that, and then you can discriminate. And what I mean by that is the executives are allocated a good number of connections because you want to treat your executives, make sure that they have access and the best user experience. And then people like me, the underlings, we just get normal support. But, and then we get fewer connections. So you can discriminate as well using query limiting, okay? Rate limiting, that is. Okay, this is an interesting feature, zero-touch database user management. And the feature, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, is authentication authorization into Active Directory and LDAP. So my question to you all is, do you understand, or what is your, when I say that, what does this mean to you? How do you understand this? When we're talking about a proxy that does authentication and authorization into Active Directory. Stephen.
So basically take the SQL Server model, which is integrated, you've got your authorization built into Active Directory, and lay that out on top of non-Microsoft, non-Active Directory enabled systems, so that you can manage the access of Active Directory rather than the database.
Yes. Did everyone understand that, what Stephen just said? Pardon me? Okay, why don't you repeat it? And I'll repeat it in my words.
So the idea is basically take and directly connect the Active Directory permissions that are configured there and the groups that are configured there. Basically take that access and authorization information and use that directly in a non-Microsoft Active Directory enabled system. And presumably there's some mapping between AD groups and, say, a role in the database or a user in the database. But connect them directly, kind of like SSO for database.
Do you guys understand that? Why, before I ask why do that, what is the problem? Well, what problem does this solve?
I don't know, I may be off the topic, but maybe client server. If you don't want unauthorized clients to attack, go to your server that's not supposed to be there.
Well, today you can access a database, users directly access a database and they have credentials and they have certain privileges. What's the problem with that today? keys are the crown jewels, but can you, from a management perspective, can you imagine like, I mean, we have authentication today. Why this solution? Why throw in AD? Can you imagine? Pardon me? Ooh, we're getting there. So when you say manage in one place, what is the benefit of that?
Delete the user or later on you can just hold permission in one place as well.
Okay, ease, management in one place, ease of management. There we go. So today you can, you have database, DBAs or application owners. What they do is they program the database today. Every user, you have the credentials, they program their credentials and then their roles, define their roles in the database. But as Stephen had mentioned, well, why reinvent the wheel? That subsystem typically exists. Over 90% of enterprise customers use Active Directory. Could we use the authentication that already exists and the group membership that already exists in Active Directory or some type of LDAP system and put that on top of your database such that there isn't a separate authentication mechanism to manage in the database? And this is what the feature is doing. So the proxy is saying, you know what, as username and password comes through, I'm going to go to Active Directory and I'm going to authenticate. And not only am I going to authenticate Roland, saying, yep, username, password works, I also know what groups you belong to and what data privileges you have or access privileges you have to that particular data. Does that make sense? So this automates the whole process. And it's not separate. So just as you mentioned, yeah. So just as you mentioned, just like password resets, it's not manual anymore. You just go through the standard Active Directory, click on the button, I forgot password. So it's leveraging your existing authentication subsystem, which you're already using. I think it's pretty clever, okay? So this is a very hot security feature, okay? Any comments? You guys like this?
Is that supposed to be create the user or the second one?
It's create role, HR user. So that's the role. It could be engineering group, HR group, manufacturing group. And that's one piece. And then you have the authentication piece. And typically, you can inherit all that in AD because that already exists. And then what happens is a security proxy will typically sync between the database and AD. When you know, when an employee leaves the company or joins the company, it's just very automatic. Because what you did for AD, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It just gets inherited by the database.
Wouldn't it be from a hacker standpoint, I mean, trying to keep the hackers out, wouldn't it be too easy for them?
Yeah, the second one.
Well, you're assuming, I guess the assumption is basically AD is protected. So instead of having a lot of subsystems, you just try to centralize in one system, which is Active Directory or some type of LDAP. Yeah. Okay. Was there a question? All right. So this is one feature, zero-touch database user management. Just click of a button, and you don't have to configure users again in the database. Yeah, in terms of authentication and group membership. So this is the only thing I'm referring to here. It's data access security. Okay.
Create role doesn't, you don't need that anymore because you do everything on that.
The second one is database masking. I think we all know this. Basically, you can edit in place data, social security number, credit card numbers, and just masking the results that come out. You can delete a row completely based on column data, and you can hide multi-tenant metadata. So one user may be able to see the data, but maybe another user cannot see the data based on user, okay? So you can mask it based on user. And then we had talked about honey tokens to be included in the data. And any questions here on masking? It's pretty self-explanatory. This is in most all database proxies.
So I've seen data masking in a lot of other situations too, like particularly like masking access to like sales data in like Salesforce. Like, think about the business rule that salespeople in this region are not able to see order or customer information in another region. Are there, do any of these products extend into like SaaS type things like Salesforce or like into the data lake world where customer?
It can, but the assumption is that this needs to sit in front of the database. If it does, that would work. So you have different user profile views based on your role, possibly based on your region as well, based on IP address, geography, things like that. But the big assumption is that this is sitting right in front of the data, and that needs to pass through it. So you need to create a perimeter of security proxies to capture that data and limit that data. Okay. Let's move on. Auditing. And I think Stephen's presentation mentioned, talked about, or was actually your product. What proxies can also do is, since all the queries are coming in, the results, it sees everything, it can log everything of who did what and when. So it's great for PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, SOX compliance, GDPR in Europe. Just a lot of granular information, and it can be exported to Splunk, Dynatrace, Datadog for further analysis and interpretation. So this is a great logging information, just to export data. Like, for example, Heimdall is just a simple flat file, CSV file, and this is all that, who did what when, and you can have at it for troubleshooting as well as for security auditing as well. Okay, and all of the proxies have this. Okay, so it's a great auditing feature.
You keep all these results in case somebody wants to get on your report for compliance.
Yeah.
You just don't do it, but you did information.
Yeah, especially Imperva and Data Sunrise. They're really, really nice reports for compliance that you meet certain requirements. It's quite elegant. Yeah, yeah. But for the other products, the data's there. It just takes a little bit more massaging and some work. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let me see. There's CloudWatch integration as well. Does anyone use CloudWatch at all? Okay. So a lot of proxies have CloudWatch integration. So we definitely want to be part of the AWS ecosystem. So we connect to CloudWatch, we connect to RDS, Redshift, all of the AWS services. And that is it. This is more of a feature. And that's it. Any comments just about database security? Yes.
So how are these proxies typically deployed? Are they deployed co-located on the database instance, which of course on managed services you're not going to do, or are they typically on their own fleet of machines?
Okay. So the question is how are these database proxies typically deployed? Well, they can be deployed anywhere. On the database side, the application side, or a proxy tier. But as you mentioned, when it's a managed service, you can't touch really the database side, like let's say Amazon RDS. So it's typically a proxy tier that sits on a Amazon EC2, EKS, ECS. And sometimes it may even sit on the application server. So it's co-resident with it. So you remove that point of latency. And that becomes very distributed at the edge. But mostly, I see the proxies having its own proxy tier. And it's doing this, it becomes its separate managed component tier. It's better for management and for control and for troubleshooting. Any other questions?
You have customers using it for load balancing?
Yeah. And if I could talk about that for a second, even though this is not security, so we're going to go off the beaten path. what proxies do also, if you've heard of PG Bouncer, Proxy SQL for MySQL, and AWS has an RDS proxy as well. They do load balancing, they do connection pooling. We do caching and splitting, routing of queries. But this is a whole different slide for a different subject. That's going to be September, Community Day. But this is not security. This is about performance boosting. But these proxies do that. A lot of them do that as well. Yeah, including load balancing. Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone.